The old record-keeper had barely finished copying the tale of the Four Directions seals when a new page demanded attention. Ling Han had returned with power rising, a daughter finally at his side, and a suspicious young man smiling a little too politely. But behind that harmless smile, Hao Jing was already moving pieces across the board, and a Heavenly Venerable Seal had become the price of something far more sinister. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the tea has gone cold while the jianghu whispers grow louder. So pour yourself a cup and settle in, daoists. Tonight's story has family reunions, an overprotective father, a dangerous suitor, and enough hidden schemes to make even an old storyteller check the door twice. Zhuang Feirui's expression darkened. With a cold snort, the fourth-tier Heavenly Venerate reached out toward the mysterious woman, his palm carrying the arrogance of an expert who had already suppressed 7 opponents of the same tier.
Humph.
But the woman merely lifted her hand and gave the lightest of waves. There was no grand technique, no dazzling display, no earth-shaking preparation. Yet the instant that motion fell, terrifying power erupted like an invisible heavenly tide. Peng Zhuang Feirui was blasted away. His figure shot across the distance until it became nothing more than a tiny speck, and then vanished entirely from sight. Silence swallowed the hall. Every expert stared ahead, as though the laws of cultivation had suddenly been overturned before their eyes. Zhuang Feirui had defeated 7 fourth-tier Heavenly Venerates by himself, yet against this woman there had been no contest whatsoever. That single exchange revealed a terrifying difference in foundation. Zhuang Feirui was already a supreme prodigy among fourth tiers, but the woman had overwhelmed him so casually that even measuring the distance between them seemed difficult. This was no ordinary advantage in battle prowess. It was suppression born from an entirely different level of talent and accumulation. Even Ling Han was shaken. He had already known this mysterious woman was frighteningly powerful, yet what he had just witnessed exceeded even his expectations. As for the woman herself, sending Zhuang Feirui flying seemed no more significant than brushing dust from her sleeve. Her gaze swept calmly across the hall before stopping almost immediately on Ling Han. A chill crept through Ling Han. Beneath that gaze, he felt as though every disguise had become meaningless, like prey that had suddenly realized a predator had noticed it.
Why keep hitting come?
She gestured toward the revolving doorway of light, openly inviting Ling Han to enter with her. Ling Han was genuinely surprised. The opportunity beyond that gateway concerned a Heavenly Venerable Seal. Why would someone this powerful willingly allow a competitor to enter at the same time? Her choice spoke loudly about her confidence. She could have forced Ling Han aside and seized the initiative, yet she did neither. To someone standing at her level, perhaps victory gained by suppressing the chance to compete held far less meaning than defeating a worthy rival openly. Ling Han's fighting spirit rose instead of retreating. Since she had offered him a fair chance, how could he shrink away now? He strode toward the doorway without hesitation. Far in the distance, Zhuang Feirui finally returned. The humiliation in his eyes immediately transformed into killing intent when he saw Ling Han.
Ling Han.
As a fourth-tier Heavenly Venerate, Zhuang Feirui pierced through Ling Han's disguise at a glance. He instinctively wanted to attack, but before he could act, the mysterious woman turned her eyes toward him. His steps stopped. She stood at the peak of the 4th tier and was even more monstrous than he was. No one knew how many powers of dimensions she had condensed, but Zhuang Feirui understood one thing with painful clarity. If he challenged her again, the only result would be another humiliation. For Zhuang Feirui, this restraint was not mercy or acceptance. Ling Han possessed a Heavenly Venerable Seal he desperately wanted, and their previous clashes had already damaged his reputation. Killing Ling Han had become tied not only to profit, but also to the restoration of his pride. Yet strength decided whose pride mattered, and with this woman present, he had no choice but to endure. Ling Han reached the woman and smiled. his eyes carrying no trace of retreat.
Miss, are you planning to compete against me?
That's right.
Her direct answer made Ling Han grin. There was something refreshingly straightforward about such confidence. She had the power to monopolize the opportunity, yet she had chosen competition instead.
Fine. Then let's compete.
The two stepped forward together. With a flash, their figures entered the revolving doorway of light and disappeared. Only after the woman vanished did the crushing pressure hanging over the hall finally disperse. The surrounding experts exhaled almost simultaneously, as though an invisible mountain had been removed from their shoulders.
Who in the world was that woman? Zhuang Feirui is already a first-rate prodigy, yet she sent him flying with one palm. Can someone that terrifying truly exist?
Curiosity quickly replaced oppression. Every person there wanted the same answer, and even Zhuang Feirui remained silent, listening.
You truly want to know who she is?
Every gaze immediately turned toward the speaker.
She is Lin Yulian.
A collective gasp swept through the hall. The name alone was enough to explain everything. Zhuang Feirui might have been the greatest genius of his own era, but Lin Yulian belonged to an entirely different category. She was regarded as one of the greatest prodigies across all ages, an existence only Xin Chihu could rival, with Wu Haoyang later joining that terrifying rank. Against names like these, even Zhuang Feirui's brilliance appeared ordinary.
Lin Yulian. No wonder her strength is so overwhelming. The greatest prodigy through the ages, she truly deserves that reputation.
Some even began indulging in impossible fantasies about someday standing beside someone of her brilliance, but most understood how vast the distance truly was. Zhuang Feirui had nothing left to say. Lin Yulian had not merely surpassed him by a small margin. Her cultivation talent and combat power both stood far beyond his reach. Faced with such an existence, resentment could not erase reality. This was perhaps the cruelest truth of the cultivation world. A genius could dominate countless peers and still discover that, before a greater genius, all previous glory meant almost nothing. There was always another mountain beyond the mountain. Yet Zhuang Feirui did not leave. Instead, he stepped through the doorway of light as well. He knew his talent and power could not compare with Lin Yulian's, but opportunities were never awarded by strength alone. Fortune, comprehension, persistence, and circumstance could still overturn expectations. When Ling Han regained awareness, he found himself standing upon another vast plain. Lin Yulian was nowhere to be seen. This did not surprise him. He had entered a spiritual world. Their physical bodies should still be inside the great hall, while each challenger faced the trial independently. Ahead stood a solitary flag. Upon it was written only one word: defend. Ling Han immediately understood the implication. This was Black Tortoise Palace. If the Vermilion Bird trial had tested one aspect of power, then Black Tortoise, the symbol of supreme defense, would naturally demand something very different. But what form would the trial take? Suddenly, danger tugged violently at Ling Han's instincts. He raised his head. The sky was falling. Countless meteors tore through the heavens and descended toward him, covering the entire plain in a blazing curtain. There were no gaps, no safe corners, nowhere to evade. Ling Han reacted instantly. Fists of fury erupted toward the sky, each punch carrying overwhelming force into the descending catastrophe. Peng! 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 Meteor after meteor exploded above him, shattered before the fragments could reach his body. The first assault was destroyed completely. There was no time to celebrate. A second wave appeared immediately, denser and more violent than the first. Ling Han remembered the trial of Vermilion Bird Hall. The pattern was becoming clear. The attacks would rise step by step until they discovered the challenger's limit. Only then would the true ordeal begin. This was not merely an examination of raw defensive power. The trial first measured exactly how much pressure Ling Han could withstand, then intended to keep him trapped beneath that pressure. In other words, Black Tortoise Palace was not asking whether he could survive one devastating attack. It was asking how long he could remain unbroken at the edge of his endurance. Wave after wave descended. At first, Ling Han destroyed them with ease, but the meteors continued growing heavier, faster, and more numerous, until even fists of fury could no longer annihilate everything falling upon him. The first meteors broke through. Ling Han immediately channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll and took the bombardment head-on. Hong long long! The plane shook beneath an endless rain of destruction. Meteors struck like heavenly hammers, one after another, without mercy and without pause. At last, Ling Han understood the essence of Black Tortoise Palace's test. It wanted him to endure a beating. That realization did not discourage him. If anything, stubbornness flared in his heart.
Come.
The meteor storm answered his challenge. Blazing masses filled the sky, descending in wave after wave until there was scarcely any distinction between Earth and catastrophe. Under such pressure, Ling Han no longer had the luxury of counterattacking. Every ounce of strength had to be poured into surviving. The indestructible Heaven's Scroll became his shield against the relentless bombardment. Yet the technique itself had limitations. It had originally been created by a first-tier Heavenly Venerate, while Ling Han's current level of battle prowess had already advanced far beyond the circumstances in which the technique had been born. Even so, when it came purely to defense, Ling Han possessed few options superior to the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. Instead of merely relying upon it, he began studying it while being bombarded, examining its flaws and attempting to reshape its principles so that the technique could better match his present strength. The trial itself became a cultivation furnace. The heavens continued roaring. Meteors descended without end, every impact seemingly determined to crush him beneath accumulated force. And therein lay the most vicious part of the trial. Ling Han had no idea when it would finish. If he had known there were only 100 waves remaining, he could have measured his strength against a visible ending. Even 10,000 waves could become a goal. But here, there was nothing. The next wave might be the last, or there might still be tens of thousands more waiting behind it. Physical endurance was only half the battle. Uncertainty attacked the mind far more subtly. A cultivator who knew exactly how much suffering remained could prepare himself for it. A cultivator who saw no ending had to defeat the temptation to surrender again and again. Black Tortoise Palace was testing not merely Ling Han's body, but the durability of his will. Ling Han gritted his teeth and endured. This kind of passive resistance was completely unlike his normal cultivation path. He preferred advancing, attacking, and breaking obstacles directly. Here, however, there was nothing to defeat except his own limit. But the Heavenly Venerable Seal waited beyond this trial. More importantly, Ling Han wanted to discover exactly how much suffering his own will could withstand. So he refused to retreat. Years flowed past inside the spiritual world. As Ling Han continued studying the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, he gradually deepened his understanding, but progress remained slow. Unlike Fists of Fury, this technique had not been created by him. Altering another expert's Tao was naturally far harder than refining something born from his own comprehension. Thus, in the end, what truly kept Ling Han standing was not a miraculous breakthrough. It was willpower. Meteor after meteor crashed into him. The pain was undeniable. Again and again, Ling Han roared beneath the bombardment, forcing himself to remain standing when every moment seemed designed to wear away another piece of his resolve. 1,000 years passed. Then 10,000. Then 100,000. Still, the meteor rain did not stop. At this point, the trial had ceased to resemble ordinary combat. No clever maneuver could shorten it, and no burst of offensive power could end the enemy. Ling Han's greatest weapon was simply the refusal to admit defeat. For a man accustomed to smashing through opposition, surviving 300,000 years of endless pressure, may have been a harsher challenge than many battles against living opponents. Only when 300,000 years had passed did the crushing pressure suddenly disappear. Ling Han felt his entire body become light. The endless sky, the meteors, the devastated plain, all vanished, and he found himself standing somewhere else. He had passed. But almost at the same instant, an overwhelming aura erupted nearby like a violent storm, suddenly born from empty space. Lin Yulian had passed as well. Ling Han could not help feeling genuine admiration. Strength capable of sending Zhuang Feirui flying was already astonishing, but enduring 300,000 years of relentless bombardment required something that raw cultivation alone could not provide. Lin Yulian's terrifying reputation clearly rested upon more than talent. Her will was equally formidable. And now, after both of them had survived Black Tortoise Palace's brutal test, their earlier promise of fair competition had gained far greater weight. Two extraordinary cultivators had reached the next stage together, and if the Heavenly Venerable Seal truly awaited ahead, then the real contest between Ling Han and Lin Yulian might only be beginning. The vast hall had fallen into absolute silence. Only Ling Han and the mysterious woman remained. This outcome did not surprise him. Anyone who had attempted to enter Midway would first have needed to survive that terrifying meteor rain, and those who failed had already been eliminated long before reaching this place. Then, with a low hum, pale golden radiance gathered in the air. A leg bone appeared before them, its entire surface glowing like ancient divine metal. Deep within that golden sheen, a vague seal flickered in and out of existence, mysterious and profound. Ling Han immediately reached forward and placed his palm upon the golden bone. At almost exactly the same instant, Lin Yulian extended her hand and touched it as well. Boom! Blinding light erupted. The leg bone shone like a miniature sun, yet an even stranger transformation occurred within the minds of the two cultivators. Their spiritual consciousness blazed brilliantly, and 3 seals rose from above each of their heads. One seal transformed into a white tiger, carrying the ferocity of slaughter. Another became a vermilion bird, blazing with majestic flame. The third manifested as an azure dragon, winding through the light with boundless authority. At the same time, the brilliance erupting from the golden leg bone condensed into the final divine beast, the black tortoise. Ling Han was genuinely stunned. Heavenly Venerable Seals were supposed to be transmitted, not preserved like ordinary inheritances. Yet at this moment, the azure dragon seal stood completely exposed before his consciousness. He could sense its structure, its rhythm, even the profound laws hidden within it.
This is a combination seal. When the 4 seals resonate with one another, the complete phenomenon can materialize. However, this opportunity exists only while the black tortoise seal has not yet dissipated.
She paused only briefly. Time itself seemed precious inside this ancient inheritance.
Hurry and comprehend it. We don't have much time.
Ling Han instantly suppressed every unnecessary thought. Whether this phenomenon contradicted what he had previously understood about Heavenly Venerable Seals no longer mattered. Before him lay an opportunity that might never appear again. His priority was simple: engrave both the azure dragon and black tortoise seals into his consciousness before the inheritance disappeared. This was one of Ling Han's greatest strengths. Faced with something incomprehensible, he did not waste the crucial moment, questioning heaven and earth. He first seized the opportunity, then searched for the answer. In the cultivation world, hesitation before fortune could be more fatal than hesitation before an enemy. The two sat cross-legged, their breathing slowed, their awareness sank inward, and the 4 ancient seals became the only things remaining within their worlds. Stroke by stroke, fluctuation by fluctuation, they branded those heavenly venerable profundities into their minds. 3 days later, the pale golden leg bone finally reached its limit. Cracks of light spread across its surface before the entire relic dissolved into countless glowing motes. The last traces drifted into emptiness, leaving nothing behind. Ling Han, however, showed satisfaction rather than regret. The Azure Dragon and Black Tortoise seals had already been imprinted inside his consciousness, yet he did not relax. Heavenly Venerable Seals were too profound for carelessness. He immediately entered deeper meditation and began studying them again. Lin Yulian did the same, except her burden was even heavier. She had 3 seals to comprehend. Time quietly flowed through the silent hall. A year became a century became a millennium. Before long, 20,000 years had passed. Ling Han finally opened his eyes. Divine light flashed through his pupils. At last all 4 directions seals, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise had been completely mastered. The benefits were astonishing. Any single one of these seals could accelerate his cultivation by 17 times, and when used in battle, it could similarly amplify his battle prowess 17-fold. But the truly shocking discovery came when the 4 seals were activated together. Instead of interfering with one another, they could be channeled simultaneously, and Ling Han's power surged to 39 times its ordinary level. 39 times. Yet that number immediately raised another mystery. If 4 17-fold amplifications could simply be added together, the result should have been 68 times. Why then was the actual increase only 39? There was another contradiction. Normally, the effects of Heavenly Venerable Seals could not be stacked. Even if several were activated, only the strongest seal should truly exert its amplification. The answer was almost certainly hidden in the 2 words Lin Yulian had spoken earlier. Combination seal. The 4 directions seals were not behaving like 4 unrelated techniques. They were pieces of a connected sequence, capable of resonating and producing an effect impossible for isolated seals. Ling Han wanted an explanation, but Lin Yulian remained deep in meditation. Waking a cultivator during such an important comprehension could destroy years of progress, or worse. Doing so would be no different from deliberately forming a deadly feud. Another realization then surfaced. Lin Yulian had apparently known from the beginning that only by acting together could they unlock the 4th Heavenly Venerable Seal and complete the 4 directions set. That explained why she had specifically invited Ling Han into the doorway of light and insisted that they undergo the test in perfect synchrony. Her invitation had never been casual. From the moment they entered together, she had already understood part of the inheritance mechanism. Ling Han possessed the ability to pass the trial. Lin Yulian possessed knowledge of how its final reward could be opened. Their cooperation was precisely what allowed the inheritance to reveal its complete form. Ling Han therefore continued cultivating while waiting. There was no reason to waste even a fraction of this precious time. Heavenly Venerate 4 directions had already revealed that mastering all 4 seals would allow the inheritor to comprehend a unique secret technique hidden within them. He began deducing the connection between the 4 seals. At first, the path was obscure, like searching for a road through endless fog. But gradually, fragments aligned, patterns emerged. The 4 divine beasts ceased to appear separate and instead became 4 corners of a single profound martial concept. 9,000 years later, Ling Han abruptly rose to his feet. His fist thundered forward. Boom Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise simultaneously manifested. 4 legendary forms surged across the hall like living embodiments of primordial power. The moment the 4 forms appeared together, the might of the technique rose explosively. Ling Han then activated the 4 directions seals and launched a second punch. This time, the phenomenon changed completely. The 4 divine beasts seemed to gain substance, their forms becoming almost tangible as an immense destructive aura swept outward. The secret technique and the 4 direction seals were clearly designed to complement one another. Used separately, each was already formidable. Used together, their resonance pushed the technique into an entirely different realm. This was the handiwork of a 5th-tier Heavenly Venerate, meaning the inheritance had value even at heights far beyond Ling Han's current cultivation. Yet Ling Han did not allow himself to become intoxicated by this new power. The technique was extraordinary, but in his heart he knew what path truly belonged to him. The 4 forms could become a deadly weapon, but the fists of fury were his own foundation. Borrowed inheritances could strengthen him. They could not replace the martial path he had personally forged. Abandoning that foundation for a brilliant inheritance would be trading his future for temporary magnificence. And so, while waiting for Lin Yulian, Ling Han returned to practicing his fist technique. Another 1,000 years passed before the woman finally emerged from meditation. Her eyes opened calmly. Before Ling Han could even begin organizing his questions, she spoke first, as though she had already understood exactly what he had been waiting to ask.
If you have questions, ask it. Whatever I am capable of answering, I will explain.
Ling Han could only find the situation amusing. Someone this perceptive hardly left the other person any chance to feel clever.
Miss, may I ask what exactly is a combination seal?
According to the statistics compiled by my father, there are 999 Heavenly Venerable Seals in total. If all of them could be mastered and arranged into their proper sequences, every seal would resonate with the others, producing power that is almost unimaginable.
Her explanation did not end there.
You do not necessarily need to possess every seal. If the seals you obtain are adjacent within the sequence, they can already resonate with one another and generate additional amplification. Naturally, the effect would be weaker than a complete sequence.
Understanding flashed through Ling Han's mind, so that was why activating all 4 4-direction seals did not produce a simple 68-fold increase. Their 39-fold amplification came from resonance rather than ordinary addition. But once he understood that principle, an even more startling possibility appeared. If 4 connected seals could already produce such a terrifying leap, what would happen if he obtained more adjacent seals? 50 times? 100 times? Perhaps even 1,000? At the level of Heavenly Venerates, the difference between possessing seals and possessing the right sequence of seals could become an abyss separating 2 cultivators who appeared equal on the surface. Lin Yulian seemed to recognize his thoughts almost immediately.
You guessed correctly. Therefore, even if 2 people possess the same number of Heavenly Venerable Seals, and those seals belong to the same level, their battle prowess may still differ enormously. If one person's seals form a sequence while the other person's do not, the gap can be tremendous.
She looked toward Ling Han and continued, deciding that since she had already begun revealing these secrets, she might as well explain the system more thoroughly.
The 999 Heavenly Venerable Seals are divided into 9 levels. Each level contains 111 seals. My father was the one who organized their classification. First-level Heavenly Venerable Seals can amplify battle prowess by roughly 4 to 10 times. Second-level seals range from 11 to 20 times. Following that progression, 9th-level Heavenly Venerable Seals can reach amplification between 81 and 90 times.
Ling Han now understood just how vast the world of Heavenly Venerable Seals truly was. Yet Lin Yulian's expression became noticeably more solemn before she delivered the most important warning.
But never assume that lower-level seals are useless. Because Heavenly Venerable Seals possess continuity and can be combined, no seal should simply be ignored. Even a low-level seal, if it completes part of a sequence, can produce formidable power when activated together with the others.
This completely changed the meaning of obtaining a Heavenly Venerable Seal. A cultivator could no longer judge treasure merely by asking, "How powerful is this seal alone?" A seemingly mediocre seal might be the missing link that transformed an entire sequence. In other words, completeness could sometimes outweigh individual quality. Ling Han nodded slowly. The information he had learned today had opened an entirely new door before him. Yet the more Lin Yulian revealed, the stronger another question became. Who exactly was this woman? She was a dignified fourth-tier Heavenly Venerate, powerful enough to suppress a prodigy like Zhuang Feirui, yet she had treated Ling Han, a first-tier, with remarkable courtesy from the beginning. Her knowledge of Heavenly Venerable Seals was equally astonishing. Unable to suppress his curiosity any longer, Ling Han finally asked the question directly.
Miss, have we met before?
Lin Yulian gave a faint smile.
My father and my brother both think very highly of Brother Ling.
Ling Han froze for an instant. Then a name flashed through his mind like lightning. A woman capable of defeating Zhuang Feirui in a single move. A woman whose father knew the total number of Heavenly Venerable Seals across the Genesis world. A woman who understood secrets as profound as combination seals. There was only one answer that made everything fit.
You are Lin Yulian.
Lin Yulian's expression remained serene.
Correct.
The mystery was finally resolved. Ling Han could only sigh inwardly. Once again, he had received assistance from the Lin clan. Another favor had quietly been added to the debt he already owed them. And the significance ran deeper than a single inheritance. Lin Yulian had not merely helped Ling Han acquire 2 seals. Through her, the knowledge accumulated by Lin Luo had opened a new understanding of the entire Heavenly Venerable Seal system before him. For a cultivator climbing toward the highest levels of the Genesis world, knowledge like this could influence every future decision involving such seals. Afterward, Lin Yulian's tone became grave. The subject was no longer inheritance, cultivation speed, or personal battle prowess. It was hysteria, the calamity threatening the entire Genesis world.
Brother Ling, Senior Brother Zhu Heng has already told my father about your conjecture. My father actually shares the same idea, but none of us are hysteria itself, so no one can truly know how far it is capable of progressing.
Those words carried far greater weight than ordinary speculation. Even Lin Luo could not determine the ultimate limits of hysteria. Against an existence capable of evolving beyond their predictions, certainty itself had become a luxury. Then Lin Yulian delivered the message her father had specifically entrusted to her.
My father asked me to tell Brother Ling this. Continue striving, and continue climbing toward the summit. In the future, you will definitely become an important link in ending the disaster brought by hysteria.
That was no ordinary encouragement. It came from Lin Luo, one of the figures standing near the summit of the entire cultivation world. For him to place such expectations upon Ling Han meant that Ling Han's future was no longer being measured only by how many enemies he could defeat or how quickly he could advance. His growth might one day become part of the struggle deciding whether the Genesis world itself survived serious catastrophe. The 4 directions seals had given Ling Han greater power. Lin Yulian had given him greater understanding. But Lin Luo's message placed something heavier upon his shoulders, a glimpse of the role he might have to bear when the final confrontation with hysteria arrived. And from this moment onward, every step Ling Han took toward the summit would carry consequences far beyond himself. Ling Han could not help feeling deeply flattered. To receive such praise from a paramount 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate was no ordinary compliment. In the vast cultivation world, where countless geniuses rose like sparks and vanished just as quickly, how many people could truly earn the recognition of an existence standing near the summit? During his years on the realm battlefield, Lin Luo had already regarded Ling Han with great optimism and had offered him considerable assistance. Later, Lin Luo's 3 disciples, Zhou Heng, Chu Hao and Lin Xiaoyang, as well as his son, had also helped Ling Han repeatedly along his path. It was precisely because Ling Han had once cultivated within the Lin clan that he had been able to charge into the 8th heaven at an astonishing speed. For a cultivator, opportunity was never merely a treasure found inside some forgotten ruin. Sometimes the recognition and guidance of a supreme expert could shorten a road that otherwise required countless years to cross.
I must express my sincere gratitude to Senior Lin.
Lin Yulian nodded gently. Encouragement flickered across her composed expression.
Keep working hard. I also have high hopes for you.
She paused only briefly before turning away.
Let's go.
The two quickly located an exit from the ancient tomb. The instant they crossed through it, the oppressive atmosphere behind them disappeared, replaced by an enormous plain stretching beneath the open heavens. Lin Yulian raised a hand in farewell. In another moment her graceful figure had already vanished into the distant horizon. Ling Han watched her departure and sighed inwardly. A woman of such extraordinary bearing naturally made one wonder whether there existed any man capable of truly catching her attention. Yet he immediately shook the stray thought away. It had nothing to do with him. He already possessed something far more precious, a warm family waiting for him. With that, Ling Han left the ancient tomb behind. The Heavenly Venerable Seals had been obtained. The secret technique hidden within the tomb had also fallen into his hands. There was no longer any reason to remain. More importantly, his identity had already been exposed. Powerful elites now knew who he was, and there was no telling how many gazes had silently locked onto him. Ling Han understood that knowing when to retreat was not cowardice. Once the greatest benefits had been secured, lingering in dangerous territory merely gave unseen enemies time to close their net. He returned to the world's paramount martial academy and reunited with the Empress and the others. Before entering the ancient tomb, they had already agreed that if the group became separated, this would be their gathering point. The others had gained nothing significant from the expedition. Yet when they learned that Ling Han had obtained all 4 Heavenly Venerable Seals, disappointment instantly gave way to joy. His gain was their gain as well. Unfortunately, the 4 forms technique could not simply be passed on to them. Its activation required the support of 4 Heavenly Venerable Seals. Without those corresponding seals, knowing the method alone was useless. This was the cruel side of supreme cultivation arts. Knowledge alone did not guarantee power. A technique might be placed directly before someone, yet without the necessary foundation, resources or seals, it remained nothing more than an unreachable door.
Let's go. Let's visit our daughter.
Ling Han smiled. He and the Empress altered their appearances slightly before entering the martial academy. Yet after searching throughout the entire place, they discovered that Ling Shi still had not returned. A trace of worry immediately entered Ling Han's heart. His daughter was extraordinarily beautiful, and the thought of her encountering someone with malicious intentions was enough to make his expression darken. Logically, there was little reason for concern. Ling Shi possessed battle prowess comparable to a pseudo-heavenly venerate. She was hardly someone ordinary troublemakers could threaten. Yet logic was one thing, and a father's concern was another. Ling Han could face heavenly venerates without hesitation, but when the matter involved his daughter, all that terrifying composure seemed to weaken. Such was the strange contradiction of family. The stronger a man became, the more painfully aware he could become of the few things he truly feared losing.
I can't help but feel worried. I need to look for her.
The Empress was far calmer. She trusted Ling Shi's strength and judgment, but since Ling Han had decided to search, she naturally had no objection. Thus, husband and wife set out in pursuit of their daughter's trail. Several years passed before they reached a small town. From the records Ling Han had gathered, Ling Shi had stayed there 7 years earlier. The clues were finally converging. Their daughter could be close.
From what I've gathered, Ling Zai was searching for the treasures of an ancient celestial king. This is the most likely location. Why don't we wait here? Might come across her at any moment.
The Empress agreed. They settled in the small town and waited. Ling Han used this period to cultivate. He now possessed 13 Heavenly Venerable Seals. Activating them together could increase his cultivation efficiency by 109 times. To ordinary cultivators, such an acceleration would sound almost absurd, yet Ling Han's situation was anything but ordinary. Within him existed boundless powers of dimension, and nurturing that unimaginable foundation consumed resources and time at an equally unimaginable rate. His greatest advantage had also become his greatest burden. The vast dimensional power inside him gave Ling Han terrifying potential, but every step forward demanded far more accumulation than other heavenly venerates required. 100-fold cultivation speed sounded heaven-defying, until it was measured against an equally heaven-defying foundation. Even the Empress was progressing faster than he was. She had already reached the late stage of the first tier and stood not far from its peak. Ling Han, meanwhile, had only just found the path toward the middle stage. Actually reaching it would still require a long period of accumulation. Heavenly Venerable Seals, he needed more, many, many more. And that realization quietly revealed Ling Han's next great obstacle. His future breakthroughs would not depend merely on secluded cultivation. If he wanted to keep advancing at a reasonable pace, he would inevitably need to seek even rarer opportunities. And every supreme opportunity usually came wrapped in equally supreme danger. 37 years passed while the two waited. For mortals, 37 years could encompass an entire lifetime's transformation. To Ling Han, however, it was hardly remarkable. At his level, even spending tens of thousands of years exploring some remote secret realm was nothing unusual. Then, on an otherwise ordinary day, heaven and earth suddenly erupted. Thunder exploded across the skies, lightning tore through the distance. The earth trembled beneath waves of terrifying force, as though the heavens themselves were threatening to collapse. Ling Han's eyes snapped open. His gaze pierced toward the distant horizon. At his cultivation level, distance seemed almost meaningless before his perception. A smile appeared on his face. Then that smile froze. His expression became indescribably strange, the sort of expression countless fathers throughout the ages would understand the moment their treasured daughter appeared beside an unfamiliar young man.
Lil Zai has a companion.
The Empress had seen it as well. Ling Shi was flying toward the small town, but she was not alone. Beside her travelled an elegant young man, handsome in appearance and carrying himself with extraordinary composure.
This bastard.
For one absurd instant, murderous irritation surged through Ling Han. The reaction was almost comical when compared with his normal calm. Ling Han had crossed blades with terrifying enemies and survived realms where death waited at every turn. Yet a stranger merely travelling beside his daughter was enough to awaken a completely different kind of hostility. Before long, Ling Shi and the young man arrived above the town. At that moment, the Empress extended her divine sense toward them. Ling Shi instantly halted.
What's wrong, junior sister Ling?
Surprise appeared on Ling Shi's face.
My mother's here.
Oh, then we must pay Auntie a visit.
The two descended and landed before the inn where Ling Han and the Empress had been staying. The Empress came out first. Despite her famously aloof nature, Many years had passed since she had last seen her daughter, and even she could not completely suppress the warmth of reunion.
Mom.
Ling Shi hurried forward and embraced the Empress. After so many years apart, she had matured into a graceful young woman whose beauty and bearing could stand beside her mother's without being overshadowed. Together, mother and daughter seemed like two magnificent lotuses blooming beneath the same sky. The Empress gently stroked her daughter's head. As for the young man standing nearby, she treated him as though he barely existed. That was entirely in character for the Empress. Even if Hao Jing had possessed some closer relationship with Ling Shi, there was little chance it would have improved his standing in her eyes. Apart from Ling Han and her daughter, very few people were worth her attention.
Mom, where's Dad?
Upstairs.
The Empress pointed upward.
Then why isn't Dad coming down?
Ling Shi was genuinely puzzled. Within the Ling clan, no one doted on her more than Ling Han. They had been separated for so many years, yet instead of rushing down to see her, he was still sitting upstairs? A faint smile touched the Empress's face.
He's a bit angry right now.
Ling Shi became even more confused. Angry? What could possibly have happened? She immediately hurried toward the stairs.
I'm going to see Dad first.
In her haste, she had no attention left for the companion she had arrived with. The young man remained composed. He bowed respectfully toward the Empress.
Greetings, Auntie. I'm Hao Jing.
His manner was neither arrogant nor servile. That single detail was enough to make Hao Jing noteworthy. He was only a pseudo-heavenly venerate, yet he could remain composed before a first-tier heavenly venerate. Either his pride was extraordinary, or the background supporting him was powerful enough that even such an encounter did not shake his confidence. The Empress gave him no reply whatsoever. Hao Jing's composure finally encountered an opponent it could not overcome. Complete indifference. A trace of awkwardness appeared, and with nothing else to do, he raised a hand and rubbed his nose. Upstairs, Ling Shi entered the room and immediately saw Ling Han seated inside. His eyes were tightly closed, his expression utterly calm, as though he had fallen asleep and knew nothing about what was happening below. Of course, Ling Shi knew her father far too well for such a performance to fool her. She walked over.
Dad.
Ling Han did not respond. Ling Shi called him several more times. Only then did Ling Han finally open his eyes, maintaining the solemn dignity of a father who had clearly decided that his daughter needed to explain herself.
It's been so long, yet you didn't come back to visit.
Zia returned once. However, Ling City already didn't exist. But I know just how capable Dad is, so I knew that there definitely wouldn't be any dangers.
Ling Han's expression immediately brightened. Praise from his daughter struck with terrifying accuracy.
Of course, your dad.
He almost began boasting before abruptly catching himself. No, absolutely not. His daughter was trying to change the subject. Ling Han cleared his throat, forced his face back into sternness, and finally asked the question that had clearly been tormenting him since Ling Shi appeared on the horizon.
Who's that brat outside?
At last Ling Shi understood. So that was why her father was angry. She found the whole situation rather amusing. Ling Han's displeasure had nothing to do with cultivation, enemies, or danger. He was simply being an overprotective father. There was an almost refreshing contrast here. A man capable of shaking great powers could still be unsettled by the ordinary complications of family. Perhaps that was precisely why Ling Han remained so human, despite standing ever closer to the summit of cultivation.
He's just a senior, from the Martial Academy. We happened to travel to the ruins, together to search for treasures. He's called Hao Jing.
Ling Han repeated the name in his mind. His expression did not improve in the slightest.
Hao Jing at times don't last long.
He shook his head with obvious dissatisfaction.
What a crappy name.
Ling Shi was left speechless. Her father had apparently decided that if he disliked the young man, then even the poor fellow's name deserved criticism. For now, Hao Jing had done nothing wrong. Yet one thing was already certain. Travelling beside Ling Shi had placed him under the scrutiny of one of the most unreasonable forces in all the worlds. A father who believed no young man could possibly be good enough for his daughter. Whether Hao Jing's calm confidence could survive meeting Ling Han face to face remained to be seen. Ling Han had only just reunited with his daughter, yet the first shadow to fall across this reunion was not an enemy, a forbidden land, or some ancient heavenly venerate. It was a young man named Hao Jing.
Dad, don't misunderstand. Hao Jing and I only happened to meet by coincidence. There's nothing between us.
Ling Shi explained herself with a smile, but Ling Han narrowed his eyes as if he were examining something far more dangerous than an ancient restriction.
Really?
Really?
Only then did Ling Han finally relax. A chuckle escaped him, carrying the unmistakable satisfaction of a father who had just confirmed that his greatest suspicion was unfounded.
Good. I was just thinking that pretty boy looks far too ordinary. How could he possibly be worthy of my precious daughter?
Ling Shi was left completely speechless. Hao Jing was no insignificant figure. His father was a fifth-tier heavenly venerate, and inside the martial academy, that background alone placed him among those few people who could move with extraordinary freedom. Yet Ling Shi had no reason to defend Hao Jing or praise him. There truly was nothing between them, and the last thing she wanted was for her father to misunderstand. She accompanied Ling Han downstairs. There, Hao Jing was still standing awkwardly, while the Empress remained aloof and magnificent, like a solitary moon hanging above the mortal world. She paid him almost no attention at all. That silence was enough to make Hao Jing restless. The instant he saw Ling Han, he hurried forward and respectfully offered his greetings.
Greetings, Uncle! I'm Hao Jing.
At that moment, Hao Jing looked every bit the modest and respectful junior.
You good times never.
Ling Han abruptly stopped himself. Even he realized that finishing such an ominous phrase directly to Hao Jing's face might be slightly too much.
Hao Jing, then, why did you come here?
Ling Han was already certain that Ling Shi had no feelings for the young man. The problem was that Hao Jing clearly had intentions toward his daughter. To Ling Han, this immediately changed the nature of the encounter. Hao Jing was no longer merely a talented junior. He had become someone who needed to be examined, measured, and if necessary, kept at a safe distance from Ling Shi. The mighty cultivator who could face terrifying enemies without blinking had suddenly become an exceedingly cautious father. Hao Jing's expression darkened for the briefest instant. He was already a pseudo-heavenly venerate, standing only a step away from the true paramount ranks, yet Ling Han had nearly greeted him with a curse. Still, because Ling Shi was present, he could not simply lose his temper. More importantly, he could not see through Ling Han at all. To Hao Jing's senses, Ling Han seemed vast and unfathomable like a boundless ocean. And yet, strangely enough, there was no detectable aura around him. At a glance, he appeared no different from an ordinary man. That contradiction came from Ling Han's unique cultivation path. Ordinary heavenly venerates nurtured powers of dimension within themselves, but Ling Han was nurturing dimensions inside individual cells. Each cell was becoming like a miniature Genesis world. Countless such cells formed one flawless whole. His strength was sealed within that perfect unity, leaving almost no power or aura to escape unless he deliberately released it. Thus, to someone unable to perceive the truth, Ling Han appeared ordinary precisely because his control had reached an extraordinary level. Hao Jing forced the awkwardness away with a smile.
Uncle truly enjoys joking. I also wanted to explore that ancient ruin, and I happened to encounter junior sister, Ling, on the way.
Ling Han gave him a knowing chuckle.
You're already a pseudo-heavenly venerate. What use could the ruins of a celestial king possibly have for your cultivation?
For a fraction of a moment, Hao Jing froze. Ling Han's question had struck directly at the weakness in his explanation. But Hao Jing reacted quickly.
To tell the truth, I specifically followed junior sister, Ling. The ruin was left behind by a ninth heaven celestial king, while junior sister Ling is only at the fourth heaven. I was worried something might happen to her.
Ling Han immediately understood the intent hidden beneath those smooth words. Hao Jing's answer was clever. He admitted that the ruin itself held little value to him, transforming what could have sounded suspicious into an act of concern for Ling Shi. It was earnest without being too direct, affectionate without openly confessing anything. Even a woman who did not return his feelings would find little grounds to rebuke such concern. And that smoothness only made Ling Han dislike him more. From a father's perspective, an inexperienced admirer might be easy to dismiss. A young man who knew exactly how to advance without crossing the line was far more troublesome.
How did the expedition go?
Not badly. Near the end, however, we triggered a restriction left by the ninth heaven celestial king, and the entire ruin collapsed.
Hao Jing spoke calmly, because there had never been any true danger to him. He was a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Even if that ninth heaven celestial king had somehow returned to life, such a cultivator would still have been incapable of threatening him, much less a restriction left behind after death. Ling Han continued asking question after question. What had begun as casual conversation gradually became a thorough interrogation, until Hao Jing's background, cultivation, and circumstances had almost entirely been laid bare. And Hao Jing's qualifications truly were remarkable. He was the only son of a fifth-tier heavenly venerate. His own talent was likewise exceptional, for after merely 3 billion years of cultivation, he had already reached the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. In the vast martial world, lineage alone could open countless doors, but Hao Jing possessed both lineage and personal talent. For most fourth heaven celestial kings, being pursued by someone of his status would be an astonishing opportunity. Yet Ling Shi was not most people. Beneath her calm and gentle exterior lay pride every bit as deep as the Empress's. Hao Jing's dazzling background and cultivation were not enough to move her. At least for now, he had found no way to truly catch her attention. Once Ling Han confirmed that his daughter had no interest in Hao Jing, his enthusiasm for the interrogation immediately faded. He turned toward Ling Shi instead.
Darling, will you come home and stay for a few days this time?
Sure.
They had been separated for far too many years. Ling Shi also felt that it was time to return home and spend some time with her parents.
Good. Rest tonight. We'll leave tomorrow.
Ling Han waved his hand, as though this were the most natural arrangement in the world. His daughter had just returned from an adventure. Of course, she needed rest. Except, strictly speaking, Ling Shi hardly needed such consideration. Ling Shi possessed a small world within herself. Once she activated its power, her battle strength could rival the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Against someone with such hidden strength, a restriction left by a mere ninth heaven celestial king could scarcely be considered a true danger. But cultivation logic meant nothing here. Ling Han was not judging her as a heaven lead. Venerate would judge another cultivator. He was judging her as a father looking at the daughter he had missed for countless years. In that role, even supreme strength could not stop him from worrying. The four of them settled down for the night. Yet Hao Jing did not remain idle for long. Before much time had passed, he sought Ling Shi out again.
Junior sister Ling, your parents are truly formidable. I was so nervous before them that my legs almost went weak.
His exaggerated complaint was clearly meant to lighten the mood.
It's actually rare for my dad to act so serious. Normally, he's quite easy to get along with.
Hao Jing could only complain inwardly, easy to get along with. Perhaps for Ling Shi. His own experience had felt much closer to standing before a tribunal. Still smiling, he shifted the conversation toward the question he truly wanted answered.
Under your father's questioning, I nearly revealed everything down to the time I stole eggs from a bird's nest when I was young. Speaking of which, I still don't know Uncle's name.
Ling Shi hesitated. She knew better than most how extraordinary Ling Han's ability to attract trouble could be. Even after all these years, there were still people in the martial academy who wanted to teach him a lesson. Rumors even claimed that throughout the Flaming Frost realm, hundreds of powerful elites wished to capture him. That was precisely why Ling Shi usually concealed the fact that she was Ling Han's daughter. Ling Han had accumulated too many enemies, and hiding her identity prevented those grudges from being redirected toward her. It was not shame or distance, it was protection. At first, Ling Shi intended to keep silent, but Hao Jing had already met her father face to face, and regardless of whether she accepted his feelings, he had treated her earnestly. Lying now did not sit well with her. After thinking for a moment, she finally answered.
My dad's name is Ling Han.
Ling Han.
Hao Jing repeated the name, then showed an apologetic expression.
Forgive me, junior sister Ling. I've never heard of your father's great name before.
Ling Shi was not offended. Ling Han's notorious reputation had once echoed throughout the martial academy, but those events belonged to a distant generation. The disciples who had personally witnessed those days had either fallen in battle or advanced into Heavenly Venerates and left the academy behind. Among the newer students, few still recognized the significance of the name Ling Han. Time has a strange way of turning yesterday's earth-shaking monster into today's half-forgotten legend. Hao Jing's ignorance was therefore not unreasonable, but ignorance of a legend does not make that legend any less dangerous.
Uncle should be a heavenly venerate, right? Even though he concealed his aura, standing before him still gave me an enormous sense of pressure.
Ling Shi nodded.
My dad is a first-tier Heavenly Venerate.
No wonder.
Hao Jing slapped his thigh as realization seemed to dawn.
Auntie possesses such extraordinary beauty and bearing as well. No wonder junior sister Ling is so exceptional.
Ling Shi responded only with a faint smile. Gentle and quiet by nature, she was unmoved by such praise. Hao Jing understood immediately that his compliment had accomplished nothing.
Junior sister, rest well. I'll take my leave.
Ling Shi politely saw him to the door. Creak. The door closed behind Hao Jing, and in the instant that Ling Shi could no longer see him, the warmth vanished from his face. A sharp light flashed through Hao Jing's eyes.
Ling Han, it's actually Ling Han. Who would have imagined that I'd encounter that rumored freak here?
Only now did the true weight of that name appear to strike him. His earlier ignorance had disappeared, replaced by calculation. That change alone revealed that Hao Jing's interest in this encounter had suddenly become far more complicated than his pursuit of Ling Shi. Hao Jing lowered his voice until the words were meant for no ears but his own.
However, this truly is an opportunity granted by the heavens.
And with that single sentence, the atmosphere changed completely. What had begun as a father questioning his daughter's admirer now carried the scent of something far more dangerous. Hao Jing had recognized Ling Han, and instead of retreating, he believed fortune had fallen directly into his hands. Whatever opportunity he saw, one thing was certain: this peaceful reunion would not remain peaceful for long. The Empress narrowed her eyes as she noticed the strange smile slowly spreading across Ling Han's face.
Why are you suddenly smiling so strangely?
Ling Han lifted a finger and gently wagged it, his expression carrying the amusement of a hunter who had just noticed suspicious tracks.
Some people's good days truly never last very long.
You discovered something.
Not yet, but I'll be watching him.
The truth was simple. Ling Han had never been completely comfortable leaving his daughter in the same room as an unfamiliar man. Almost instinctively, he had extended his divine sense toward Hao Jing. With Ling Han's present strength, Hao Jing was merely a pseudo-heavenly venerate. There was no possibility that he could detect that invisible scrutiny. Every word Hao Jing spoke had entered Ling Han's ears, including those quiet mutterings he believed were heard by no one.
He clearly knew who I was, yet deliberately pretended that he had never even heard my name. That alone tells me there's something wrong with this brat. Still, I want to see what other tricks he has hidden.
For Ling Han, the suspicious lie was more important than the lie itself. Hao Jing had chosen deception before any confrontation had even begun, which meant there was almost certainly a purpose behind his approach to Ling Shi. Instead of crushing that purpose immediately, Ling Han intended to let it reveal itself. The Empress, however, showed little interest. Her pride stood far above such petty schemes. A pseudo-heavenly venerate playing games in front of them was simply not something worthy of occupying her thoughts. The following day the group departed once more. Returning to the original Ling city was naturally impossible. Ling Han did not even know whether those enraged heavenly venerates had already destroyed it. So they simply chose another location and decided to establish a new Ling city there. For ordinary mortals, raising a city required countless hands, stone, timber, and years of labor. For heavenly venerates, creation on such a scale could be accomplished with little more than a thought. Before long, another Ling city stood beneath the heavens. One after another, everyone emerged from their spatial god tools and spatial celestial tools, returning to their own affairs as life settled into its familiar rhythm. Ling Han had not originally intended to stop so soon, yet Hao Jing's suspicious behavior changed his mind. If the young man truly had hidden intentions, then Ling Han would give him enough room to act. Of course, there was a far simpler solution. Ling Han could seize Hao Jing immediately, suppress him, and interrogate him. With the enormous difference in strength between them, Ling Han was certain Hao Jing would eventually reveal everything. But Ling Han rejected that path. He wanted the entire matter to unfold openly. If Hao Jing truly deserved death, then Ling Han intended to make certain that death came with no ambiguity and no unanswered questions.
You're simply bored.
The Empress's remark struck directly at the truth. Ling Han burst into hearty laughter. Indeed, boredom was part of the reason. Since Hao Jing wanted to hide behind a mask, Ling Han did not mind watching the performance continue for a while longer. This was the absurd gap created by overwhelming power. To Hao Jing, whatever he was planning might be a dangerous secret requiring years of caution. To Ling Han, it was little more than a diversion he could end whenever he wished. Even so, Ling Han would never truly waste his time. While observing Hao Jing, he continued cultivating and remained alert for any news concerning Heavenly Venerable Seals.
Although the Flaming Frost Realm is the only transcendent dimension, the Genesis world is unimaginably vast. Opportunities must be hidden in countless places. But I'm only one person. I can travel between dimensions, yet my senses cannot spread across the entire Genesis world. If a Heavenly Venerable Seal appears somewhere far away, how would news ever reach me?
A possibility suddenly flashed through his mind.
What if I create a large number of clones? They wouldn't need overwhelming strength. They would only need to serve as my eyes and ears.
His heart immediately stirred with excitement. Every dimension had produced heavenly venerates. Across endless ages, many of those supreme experts had undoubtedly died, some unable to advance further, others falling beneath the hands of their enemies. Time buried experts, but it did not necessarily erase what they left behind. After countless years, ancient inheritances could resurface, and among them there might be Heavenly Venerable Seals. This was no casual treasure hunt. Heavenly Venerable Seals directly affected the combat power and cultivation of those standing near the summit of the Genesis world. Missing even one suitable inheritance could mean losing an opportunity that might never appear again. Creating scouts across the dimensions transformed Ling Han's search from chance into a vast information network. Ling Han had never been someone who hesitated once a path became clear. He immediately began forging his clones.
They don't need to reach the Heavenly Venerate level. 9th heaven should be enough.
To Ling Han, this sounded like a modest requirement. Yet even in the flaming frost realm, 9th heaven celestial kings were powerful elites standing near the peak of the celestial king realm. That simple remark showed how completely Ling Han's perspective had changed. Strength that countless cultivators might spend their entire lives pursuing had become, in his eyes, merely sufficient for a scouting body. He separated a tiny piece of his own flesh, infused it with a sliver of the powers of dimension, and placed within it a minute fragment of his divine sense. With those ingredients joined together, a clone took form. Ling Han examined the result carefully.
In the end, it's still only a rough creation. Although it possesses 9th heaven strength, it can survive for only 100 million years. Once that time passes, the powers of dimension sustaining it will disappear, and the body will collapse. The fragment of divine sense will return to me, and I'll have to create another one.
Replacing every clone once every 100 million years was troublesome, but compared with the value of discovering Heavenly Venerable Seals, such inconvenience was insignificant. Ling Han proceeded to create clone after clone. Then he crossed the Genesis world, dimension by dimension, leaving one scout behind wherever he deemed it worthwhile. His targets were the high-level and medium-level dimensions. The countless low-level dimensions were ignored. The reason was straightforward. Under normal circumstances, low-level dimensions could produce only second-tier heavenly venerates at most, and experts at that level neither possessed the qualifications nor the ability required to cultivate and produce Heavenly Venerable Seals. Ling Han himself was naturally an exception to such common rules. Yet his third-tier battle prowess had only been forged after he travelled through the Genesis world and gathered powers far beyond what a single low-level dimension could offer. Had he remained confined to one low-level dimension, even someone as abnormal as Ling Han could never have reached his current monstrous level. So Ling Han's choice was not arrogance but efficiency. Searching low-level dimensions would consume enormous time, while offering almost no realistic chance of discovering the seals he wanted. His resources were vast, but the Genesis world was even vaster. Once the deployment was complete, Ling Han finally returned to Ling City. He had visited fewer than 2,000 dimensions, yet the journey had still consumed almost 10,000 years. His prolonged absence was hardly a secret. For 10 millennia, the Lord of Ling City had not shown himself. The moment he returned, Ling Han asked about the matter he had left behind.
Has Hao Jing done anything suspicious?
No, he's been extremely careful.
Before leaving, Ling Han had entrusted the task of watching Hao Jing to who knew. In truth, she was the only suitable choice. The Empress regarded such surveillance as beneath her dignity, while the others lacked the cultivation needed to shadow a pseudo-heavenly venerate without being exposed. As for who knew, she would never reject something that sounded this entertaining.
All right, I'll take over from here.
No exclamation new wants to keep playing. We'll do it together.
If other heavenly venerates had witnessed this scene, they might have been speechless. Who knew was a second-tier heavenly venerate, while Ling Han possessed battle prowess reaching the third tier. Yet these two supreme experts were treating a pseudo-heavenly venerate as the center of an elaborate game of surveillance. From the outside, it almost seemed as if they were giving Hao Jing far too much importance. In reality, the opposite was true. Ling Han could afford patience precisely because Hao Jing posed no immediate threat to him. At that moment, Ling Han truly had little else demanding his attention. His cultivation continued. His clones had already spread through the dimensions, and any major discovery would eventually be transmitted back to him. So he settled in and waited. Hao Jing proved remarkably patient. He behaved carefully, never stepping beyond the boundaries that might invite suspicion. Around Ling Shi, he remained respectful and restrained. Their relationship remained that of senior brother and junior sister. He never rushed forward and never exposed any obvious ulterior intention. That patience itself was noteworthy. A reckless schemer might reveal himself within days, but Hao Jing was willing to wait for 10,000 years. Whatever he wanted, he clearly believed it was valuable enough to justify an extraordinary amount of caution. Eventually, after 10,000 years, Ling Shi approached her father with a request. She wanted to return to the martial academy. She could not remain at home forever. Ling Han considered the matter briefly. He did not refuse, but he added one condition.
Stay another 10 years. After that, you can leave.
Ling Shi hardly knew whether she should laugh or sigh. Her father could sometimes behave almost childishly, and now he was even bargaining over 10 years after already keeping her home for 10,000. Still she agreed, and only a few days later the silence finally broke. Hao Jing quietly slipped out of Ling City and entered a forest far from watching eyes. There he took out a communication seal.
Senior brother Luo, how are things on your side?
A voice answered from the seal, carrying obvious dissatisfaction.
I'm almost successful. Junior brother Hao, didn't I tell you already for safety? We shouldn't contact each other before I arrive.
The situation has changed. Ling Zai will return to the Martial Academy in 10 years. We don't have much time anymore. You must get here before she leaves.
A brief silence followed.
I'll do my best.
Then the man on the other side suddenly chuckled.
Junior brother Hao, just what is so special about that mother and daughter that you're willing to sacrifice a Heavenly Venerable Seal for them? Why not simply give that seal to me?
The casual words instantly exposed the extraordinary stakes hidden beneath Hao Jing's patient disguise. A Heavenly Venerable Seal was not some ordinary gift or bargaining chip. Hao Jing was apparently prepared to surrender something coveted even by heavenly venerates in order to obtain whatever he sought from Ling Shi and her family. That single revelation transformed his suspicious behavior into something far more serious.
You don't need to concern yourself with that. If you want the Heavenly Venerable Seal, then bring that thing here immediately.
All right. Who told you to be Master Sani? Suppose my fate is to run errands for you. Anyway, I'll get there as quickly as possible.
Crackle. The communication seal suddenly ignited in Hao Jing's hand, burning itself into ash and erasing the evidence of their exchange. This was no ordinary communication treasure. Hao Jing's father had personally crafted it, allowing Hao Jing to contact both his father and his senior brothers across great distances. Hao Jing brushed the ashes from his hands, his expression darkening.
Oh Zhempie, if father weren't cultivating in seclusion, why would I ever let you take such benefits?
He turned and looked toward Ling City. The careful mask he had worn for 10,000 years finally slipped, revealing open greed in his gaze. At last, Hao Jing's true nature had begun to surface. His respectful behavior, his endless patience, and his harmless senior brother facade had not erased his hidden purpose. They had merely concealed it. And now the mention of the mysterious object being brought by senior brother Luo suggested that the real scheme had yet to begin. With a rush of movement, Hao Jing left the forest and swiftly returned toward Ling City, believing his secret conversation had passed unnoticed. Only after he disappeared did two figures step out from a nearby hiding place. Ling Han, and who knew? The prey had believed himself cautious. Unfortunately for him, the hunters had been beside him the entire time. Who knew tilted her head and thought hard. A moment later, her eyes suddenly brightened, and she clapped her hands.
Exclamation new. Remembers now exclamation about 10,000 years ago. He contacted that senior brother Luo, or whatever his name was. He told him to search for some kind of blood clay.
Ling Han could only stare at her. 10,000 years of surveillance, and only now did Who Knew remember such an important clue. Ling Han could not help but wonder how someone so powerful could remain so spectacularly unreliable at the most unexpected moments. Yet the forgotten clue might prove crucial. Blood clay, the mysterious object senior brother Luo was bringing, and a Heavenly Venerable Seal offered as payment. 3 pieces of the puzzle had finally appeared. Hao Jing's mask had cracked, but whatever lay beneath it was still waiting to be exposed.